Brought to you by Mint Mobile. Stay tuned for a special offer at the end of the show. Hi, and welcome to the Mobile Tech Podcast. I'm your host, Miriam Jour, and today is Friday, March 15th, 2024. And I've got the lovely John Velasco here with me again. Hi, John. How are you?
Good. How you doing, Miriam? Thanks for having me.
I'm great. I'm glad to have you on again. The news aren't particularly interesting this week, but there's a few things that came about, and I haven't really talked to you in a while, so I'd love to hear your thoughts on kind of what's going on with the current phone world in your book. Like, what are the devices that you're using right now that you're excited about and stuff like that, and then we'll dive into some of the news. There's really not too much to go through. The other thing I want to talk about a little bit is I don't want to talk specifically about any EV news because we did a lot of EV coverage in the last 2 or 3 shows, but I did get a chance to travel with eBay Motors to try out snow tires on different cars. And that was exciting because, I used to drive in the snow when I lived in Canada when I was a student. Now I'm part-time in Canada, but it's not where it snows. Vancouver doesn't have any snow. So it was kind of nice to go back to a safe environment to try out some driving in the snow with the right equipment. So let's talk about that a little bit, because I think with EVs, snow tires are going to become a whole different thing. So anyway, what are the devices you're using right now? What is like really kind of, floating your boat?
I guess what I just tried recently was the Nothing Phone 2A, which it's a really nice phone. Given the price point, the features, the specs, it's a great value phone at
Yep.
$349 here in the US. It still has those cool, glyph interface lights, which, makes it look flashy. So I think it's a great value. And, for me personally, am I inclined to buy the $1,000 plus smartphones? Maybe. So, there's a lot of, for me, value in these budget phones. And yeah, I'm actually really surprised by, how well it works, especially the battery life. Like the battery life we tested. And for the price point, it beat out like the Pixel 7a, which is probably arguably the budget phone to beat.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. A lot of people are comparing that phone to the Pixel 7a, but I think you can't do that. It's such a price jump from 350 to 500. I
500,
know,
yeah.
of course, you can get deals on the Pixel. You can still buy the 6a, I think, for a really good deal, which is also a really solid phone. I feel like because we're here in the US, and you probably see this too since you're reviewing phones, right? Like, I think that we're conditioned to think that 500 is kind of mid-range and
Mid-range,
350
yeah.
is budget. But
Yep.
really, in the rest of the world, 500 is an entry-level flagship or a premium mid-ranger, right? And in the
Yeah.
markets that nothing is targeting at 350, this is a mid-range phone. So in a way, yes, you can compare them because, US pricing on the 7A and then rest of the world pricing. But when I see people in the US say this is a budget phone, I'm like, it's not a budget phone. Like the price to the US customers looks like a
Yes.
budget because it's like Moto G pricing, right? But that
Exactly,
thing
yeah.
blows away the Moto G, right? Any Moto G. So you're right in that sense. I think that it's just really hard to compare because it's not officially sold here. Did you play with the previous Nothing phones at all?
I just, over last year, Nothing Phone 2,
Okay.
which was what, 600, I want to say?
Yeah, roughly.
So
Yeah.
it's a tough price point because, this one here is what, 350 here in the US. That one's 600. So that's half the cost. And that to me is like a big difference and big price jump.
But at the same time, you get the OnePlus 12R that you can basically send like a piece of burnt electronics to them and get $100 off, which brings it down to like what,
400?
$399 at that price,
Yeah, yeah.
$50 more. I think it blows away the Nothing Phone 2A, right?
Oh, you make an excellent point there, I gotta say. We did test out the OnePlus 12R, and that it blows away every other, well, I don't want to say every other phone. It's pretty much a runner up to our best battery life phone. With it's just incredible how much juice you get out of that phone, and for the price point, the cameras, the way it looks, the design too. Yeah, it's not as flashy as the Nothing
No.
Phone 2A, but I think toe to toe, it's definitely a contender.
I agree. And so it's tough right now because, like I just bought my mom a Pixel 7a because I feel like, it's the easiest for her to kind of adapt to because, when I set up her phones in the past, she's never had a Pixel. She had, like, she's in Europe, so she had Honor, she's
Yeah.
had Samsung, and I would set them up with all the Google apps on purpose. Like I would try to
Hmm.
turn it into a Pixel as best I could so
Yep.
that, she could switch phones without too much, without getting too overwhelmed. And and so it was easy to get her on the Pixel, but she wanted to buy it from her carrier, and of
Hmm.
course, there was a good discount on the 7A, and I'm like, you can't go wrong with that, right? Like it's like, it was either that or a Redmi of some kind, which was great too, but she wanted a smaller phone, so the Redmi
Yeah.
was like, typical Chinese phone, 6.7 inches.
Massive.
On paper, it had better specs, but I knew the software experience would be better for my mom. And also, imaging is really hard for her. Like she really
Yeah.
needs something where she can tap the button and it just takes a good photo every time, right? It's like
Yeah.
she's 79, 80 years old now, so it's she's still really with it and really like active and stuff. So that's why she
Yeah.
likes to take photos. But I feel like, today, if you look at what's available, like the 12R, like wholly compelling. Like if you're considering, like, even if you buy it without the trade-in, like it's like,
500. Yeah.
yeah, so I feel like for those of us who are a little more, tech savvy early adopter like my audience, I think it's a tough call right now if you have to spend 350 to $500. The only thing that, now that I've actually used a Nothing phone for a little bit longer, because when I talked about it last week on the show, it was basically I just had used it for like a day,
Yeah.
is the camera is a little disappointing. And I know I use flagships all the time,
Hmm.
but I was expecting a little more based on the spec sheet of the camera and the processor. And I'll give you an example, right? Here's another phone that you can buy for $399 right now that is very similar in spec to the Nothing Phone 2A, and that's the Moto Edge 2023. Not the Edge Plus, but the Edge. Now, when it came
Yeah.
out, it was a $600 phone. And honestly, for $600, it had some really nice things. Metal construction,
Hmm.
pleather back. It's got OIS on the camera. It's got wireless charging. It's basically, it looks and feels like a flagship, but it's only got a Dimensity 6020, right? So that's not quite as good as the Dimensity 7020 that's in the Nothing Phone 2A. But even that phone, even with a 6020, takes better photos than the Nothing
Yeah.
Phone 2A. And I'm like, if Moto is beating you, you
Yeah.
really
What are you
do
guys
need
doing?
to work on your software.
Yeah.
So
No.
it's not that overall the camera is bad. Like I think that if you're not pixel peeping, it's okay. The problem I have is that as soon as you zoom, even 2x, which is
Yes.
my
Yes.
2x is my go-to.
Yeah.
Like I shoot
Yeah.
almost everything at 2x. And normally 2x is like it's brain dead easy. Like you get a shot and you look at it and
Yeah.
yeah, you lose a tiny bit of detail, but it's like you don't really have to worry about it, especially with a 50 megapixel sensor. But
Yeah.
on this camera at 2x, I'm starting to see crunchiness. At 3x, I'm like, holy crap. At 5x, it's like an oil painting. And
It's
look,
different. Yeah.
Look, I know there's no dedicated telephoto, but back me up on this, John. You've
Yeah.
used the Pixel 7a. At 5x, it holds
Yes.
its own, right?
It does. It does. It's sharper in the background. And yeah, you got to hand it to whatever Google's doing with their image processing. It's light years better than what they're doing with the Nothing Phone 2A. And like you said, the standard camera, in great conditions, lighting conditions, it's excellent. It could, match toe to toe against the Pixel 7a. But then once you start using that zoom, um, over two times zoom, it just falls apart. And which is kind of interesting because a lot of phones are doing the pixel binning. We've seen this before. The iPhone
Yeah.
15, the two times zoom, what they're doing, they're taking that sensor, cropping in, and
Yep.
it matches pretty much what the iPhone 14 Pro with its telephoto
It
lens
started.
does.
Yeah, yeah.
So I guess it's about that image processing, and Google's doing a much better job at it.
Yeah, and even the OnePlus, the 12R, even, as I said, Moto. Like, look, Moto's not my go-to, okay, for cameras. Like, I'm like,
Yeah,
okay, I actually didn't review the Edge 2023. I got one. I didn't have time. But it was kind of a sleeper hit, I think. If you didn't know that phone existed, it flew right over everybody's head and like it wasn't on anybody's radar. But if you knew it existed and you tried it out for a bit, you'd be like, wow,
yeah,
like it's not crappy. Now $600, I wouldn't buy it. But $399 right now, of course there's 12R at $399, so that's a whole
yeah,
different story. But It's interesting to me that, you know, I think nothing did a good job with the design, the battery life, the performance. It feels really snappy too, right?
Yeah. Yep.
That's a
Yep.
nice thing to have. But I'm a little bummed because I thought, you know, when Carl was like doing all this viral stuff ahead of time, he was like, yeah, and we really feel like, what do we want to prioritize? You know, the overall experience, the battery life, the camera. And I'm like,
Hmm.
and I feel like it's a software thing, John. I don't think that the camera sensors aren't that bad. Like I feel like they just need 2 or 3 software revisions to get to it.
Yeah. Yeah. And you make a point too about software. You speak about software support. Google is
Oh,
on top of that. If you're buying a phone, even a budget phone, when you buy a flagship phone, you expect it to last you 2 years. I would hope you at least 2 years, probably more in the range of 4 years. But even budget phones for people who are investing, that money into a
yeah.
phone, after 2 years, you're talking about software support that's no longer going to give you the security updates that you need, and that's a tough sell because even at 350, for a phone like that, like just blows my mind that it's not going to be as good as a Pixel.
Yeah. Yeah. But look, I love that phone and I love what Nothing's doing. And the phone
Yeah,
2 is solid. The phone 1, you know, for a first phone was pretty okay as well. I want
yeah.
them to succeed. I like their earbuds too. So that
Hmm.
has definitely been an exciting phone. For me, another phone I've been using that, you know, by the way, I just got the 14 Ultra from Xiaomi with the photography kit shipped to me 2 days ago. I'm going to do an unboxing videos for everyone, but holy crap, right?
Zoom lens gonna
So,
rival. Yeah.
so I now also have the 14. It's in a case here. Let me take it out so people can see how pretty that thing is. Look at that shiny, beautiful
Oh,
thing.
emerald
So
green.
this is green 14, not 14 Pro, not Ultra, but look at how small this phone is. I mean, probably can't tell, but like put it next to my head. This is the size of an S24.
Mm,
Like, you know, or like a iPhone 14 or 15. Like it's
15. Yeah.
small
Yeah.
and, you know, 6.3-inch kind of size. And because of that, it's really a different experience than the 6.7-inch phones I'm used to. But there's no compromises here. This is a full-on flagship. So I took it for a
Hmm.
spin finally yesterday because I've had it for a few days. I figured, you know, give it a day or two of love before I jump into the 14 Ultra, right? Because you
Yeah.
know I'm
Yeah.
gonna play with that
You
one
gotta
for
settle it.
weeks,
Yeah.
right? So I'm like, give the 14 a few days before you jump into the Ultra, so you can kind of prepare yourself for what the experience. Plus, both are running Hyper OS, which is, you know, the new skin from Xiaomi. So anyway, very solid camera on this thing. Even considering it's not remotely as good spec wise as the 14 Ultra.
Mm.
So I like what Xiaomi's doing here. I wish like the color is pretty, but the design's a little boring. It looks a lot like an iPhone, right? Like if you didn't see, if it's turned off and you don't see the notch, like it's like,
Yeah.
what
Looks
is
like it.
this, you know? And then especially the
USB.
back, like, you know, you just flash it
Yeah.
like
It's
this and it
square.
just kind of looks like an iPhone. I wish Xiaomi wasn't copying as much. They also have that
Hmm.
weird thing that, you know, a lot of Chinese UIs have where if you pull from the left side of the top, you
Oh,
get the
yeah. It's
notification. You
so
pull from the
annoying.
right side, you get
Yes.
the quick settings, which is an
It's like
iPhone thing,
OnePlus.
and I absolutely despise it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you know, in the old days with Xiaomi, there was an option in the settings you could turn that off.
Yeah.
Now you're stuck with it.
You're forced with
So
it. Yeah.
Xiaomi software, man. Like, I'm still, if I'm going to pick a Chinese phone, I'm still going to pick, I think, Oppo, OnePlus, Realme,
Yeah.
not Vivo, because their software is really weird, but like the three kind of like main players at BBK Group, because their software is pretty much
Hmm.
identical. And it's still Android. Like, you know, you've used the
Yeah.
OnePlus Open. We all love the OnePlus Open, right? And
Yeah.
the software on this is so good. So we know that, you know, Oppo is not far behind and Realme is not far behind either, even though they're not quite as good as OnePlus.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's what I've been playing with. I also have the Vivo V30 Pro, which I mentioned on the show last week. I haven't played with it yet, so stay tuned for that, folks. Any other phones that you're excited about right now that you're playing with?
Um, Playing around with, we're in that space right now where it's like the lull, the calm before the
Thank
storm.
God.
Before, yeah, it's giving us
It's
time to
been
catch up.
insane. I know.
Yeah, so played S24 Ultra, the OnePlus 12, 12R, and the Nothing Phone 2A. I think the next one that I'm going to be I guess, excited about is going back to Motorola, their new Moto Edge Plus 2024,
Yeah,
because
you
I
wrote
feel
an
like,
article about what you expect that to bring to the table.
yeah,
I'll put it in the show notes.
yeah, it's one of those phones people forget. To me, when I think of Motorola now, I just think about the Razor. That was the priority, that was the focus, and after the years of messing around with the Moto X series, the Moto Z, the mods, and I'm like, they've kind of fallen off that flagship space for a little bit, and now they're slowly building up, and I feel like this might be the phone for them that really is the dark horse for flagship. So that's the one I'm looking forward to the most.
Yeah, I'm actually reviewed the Edge Plus 2023 last year, and I was very impressed. Again, camera needed a little bit of tweaking. I mean, it was definitely the best camera they've ever done yet. But
Hmm.
the competition, thankfully, isn't standing still, so it still wasn't like it was as good as last year's flagship, but not as good
Yeah.
as like yeah, it was as good as 2022, but not as good as 23. Um, and so I'm hoping they can catch up there. Yeah, I'm excited. Speaking of which, let's get into the news because the first
Yeah.
set of one of the first phones that was announced this past week is the new Moto G series. And well,
Yes.
it's something. What are your thoughts?
250, right? Really
Yeah,
ultra budget.
yeah. So we got the G Power 5G 2024 and the Moto G 5G 2024. And I'm very meh on the G series ever since they used to be a price leader
Yeah.
and they used to deliver, it's a little more premium experience. Like, remember when the Moto G had a metal frame and a glass back, and
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it just tried. And the software has always been great because Moto software is really lightweight, and I love the things like the chop chop
Twist.
to
Yeah.
turn on the flashlight, the twist
Yep.
for the camera, all that great
Camera.
stuff.
Yep.
Software is not an issue. It's always the hardware, and that's why I feel like the Moto G have gone up in price and down in quality, like at least not the
Hmm.
build quality or the durability, but the initial feel.
Hmm.
So
Yep.
that's kind of what I want them to improve, especially because I know they can get away. They sell so many of those in South America. When I was down in Argentina for my trip to Antarctica, I spent a few days there,
Hmm.
and Moto's everywhere. Like, it's so bizarre to be in a place where half the people that you see on the streets are holding a Moto phone. But
It's not
it's
rare
a
here.
thing. So, but they
Yeah.
sell the same phones as we have here, but they sell them under slightly different names for a lot less money. And in
Hmm.
my opinion, the money that they sell them for abroad matches the spec sheet better.
Yeah.
Here, they're almost asking for nothing phone 2A money for these
Yep.
phones that really should be $100 less, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Do you feel
Like
the
what,
same way?
$300? Yeah.
Yeah.
No, the price point has gone up. And when you're competing at that 300, you're playing in a crowded field there already. And yeah, it just feels like they've kind of switched gears to what was, the intent of the Moto G line, which was super value cost. $200. I remember, I think the first Moto G. And when you're competing against the Nothing Phone 2A, and to an extent, if you could find deals on the Pixel 7a or even the 2022 iPhone SE, which are all benchmarks to beat at that price point, you got to figure out how you're going to beat them, especially in the camera department. Like, I think even the Razor, the most recent Motorola Razor Plus, it kind of had an underwhelming camera experience. And, to me, I feel like maybe that's going to be the same thing with these phones. Although the G Power, I'm kind of curious about the battery life because they did put in a pretty hefty
Yeah, and also,
battery in there.
the specs are pretty solid on that phone. I'm not too unhappy with that one. And vegan leather as an option for some of them. So they might be addressing some of the issues that we've
Yeah.
been complaining about. Also, did you notice NFC on both of them? Like,
Wow. And
they've just been not having NFC on so many of the Moto Gs in the last few years. I don't know why. And now finally.
it's, yeah,
I mean,
I,
come
I don't
on.
know why. Yeah.
Like, I mean, before the pandemic, I kind of understood. It was like, okay, like maybe not everybody cares. But now I feel like tap to pay, it's kind of a
You
thing,
have to do it. Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know.
That's shocker.
Yeah. But yeah, that's the first Moto G 5G at least that have NFC. I think the Power might have had it before at some point, but they keep like it's there and it's not, you never know. And I'm like, come on. Like, I remember talking to their execs about this, going like, you cannot do this. Like I don't really care. Like, yes, the pricing is a little too high. Yes, the materials are a little too crap. But the
Yeah.
NFC thing, like, what are you thinking here?
Why?
Like,
Yeah.
anyway. So that's cool. We've got some new motos to talk about, and review. So hopefully I'll be getting one of these sometime soon. And then moving on, the Moto G5G, has a Snapdragon 4 series, and I'm not too excited, but the power has a 7020 MediaTek Dimensity in there.
Yeah.
And that's actually a pretty solid chip. Like that's the same thing as in the Nothing Phone 2A. So should be pretty good, right?
Yeah, no, I think if based on, the power efficiency of the chipset and when you pair it with the battery, like it should give you a pretty good amount of time.
Yeah. Oh, and look, it has 15 wireless charging as well.
Wireless charge. I was going to say that's a shocker because even the Nothing Phone 2A does not have wireless charging.
So this is the one I'm excited about. Let's see what happens when I get one. Okay, Samsung is a big player here. Very strange move from Samsung here. The
Why? Yeah,
Galaxy
why?
A55 and A35 are out this week. And
Hmm.
you wrote an article comparing the Galaxy A55 to the Pixel 7a. I will include that in the show notes. But am I right here? This is a global announcement because the US is not getting the A55. We're only getting the A35. Am I losing my
A35, yeah.
mind?
That's what I've been hearing. Initially when they announced it, I thought it was coming to the U.S. like everyone else, and then there's
I mean, why
clarification later
wouldn't
on
it?
that yeah, we had the A54 last year, and that was a premier budget friendly phone. But so it's to me it just and you're gonna replace it with the A35. Technically, that's a big downgrade between the two. So it's I'm just wondering myself why they made that decision.
So, just by the way, I read an article somewhere. I should have put it in the show notes, but I don't remember who wrote it, saying that Samsung was asked, I think it was The Verge, why they did this. And they basically said, we have the S23 still on sale and the S23 Fan Edition,
50,
right?
yeah, yeah, yep.
And I'm like, okay, yeah, I get that, but that's still a big gap. Like the 35, let's look at the specs together here. Like, I don't feel like we're getting I mean, both of them have large displays, 6.6
Yep.
inch AMOLED
Super
1080p,
AMOLED. Yep.
120 hertz. That's nice.
120, which is yeah, really
Yeah,
nice.
that's solid. 5,000 milliamp, 25-watt charging, fine. But then, then it kind of goes downhill from there, basically. I don't mean to be mean, but 55 is an Exynos chip,
Yep.
and some decent amount of RAM and storage. And then the A35 has a lesser Exynos
1380.
with
Yeah.
less storage and RAM. So basically, that's what I think is the difference. The cameras, there's a difference in cameras as well, on the selfie at least. And
13, yeah.
OIS, there's no OIS on the 35. So, and then a macro camera. Who needs a third camera? Like, ugh, I hate those
They
macro
just want
cameras,
to. It's a
John.
number thing.
I know. Sells really well in India the more cameras you have. That's why
Yeah.
we're plagued with those 2 megapixel macro cameras on all the BBK
Yeah.
group and the Xiaomi group phones. Ugh, you and I should have a rant about this for half an hour starting now. No, I'm just kidding. Do you feel the same way, those 2 megapixel cameras?
Yeah.
It's
Like,
just,
well, it's. I'm always questioning about macro cameras. Why? What's the appeal? Like, just give us a 2x. I'll gladly take
yeah.
a 2x optical zoom any day. So
Then
to
you
me,
can
it's
use it
just
for for macros because you just pull back a bit.
yeah, and then with the large main camera sensor, you could still crop
Crop,
into that
yeah.
sensor and still technically, even though you're a little bit further away, you could still take a macro shot and make it look, really sharp. So yeah, to me, it's just a numbers game. Triple camera system in a sub $600 phone. Very rare. Look how many the iPhone SE has. Only one.
One. Yeah. Good point. You compared the A55 to the 7A from
7A.
Google.
Yep. Yep.
I think the takeaway from what I read was this is why they should bring it to the US because there are some ways that it's actually a better phone, right?
Yeah. Yeah. the durability, I think, they put the Gorilla Glass Victus, they're using that. So as far as drop resistant, yes, it's gonna, be a little bit better than what the Gorilla Glass 3, I believe it's in the Pixel 7a. And what is it? I think the refresh rate. Let me know if
Yes,
I'm wrong.
90
The
90
refresh rate.
versus 120. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Is that a big difference? No, but it's nice that even a phone like in that price range has 120 hertz refresh rate, which is pretty much what you find in any flagship nowadays.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's it's tough call why they're not going to bring it out here to the U.S.
And yeah, it's just I don't know, it's weird. Maybe, they're not getting the uptake they were hoping for from the prepaid side of things because I think there's an argument to be made that the 35 is a better fit for the prepaid market, right? Price wise.
In a ways, yes,
Because,
yeah,
think about it. People walk if they're postpaid, they walk into a Verizon or a AT&T or T-Mobile store, they're going to walk out with a Galaxy S series. You know it. Like
yeah,
there's going to be such a small difference between an A54 and an S24 or sorry, say S23 fan edition from last year for the
hmm
monthly fee that people are not going to care.
yeah. It's too
And they want
minimal.
the same phone as their friends, right? Even
Yeah,
though, I think some people are not like maybe your mom doesn't care, but I bet you the teenagers at school, they'll compare and say, "Oh, you got the A54, you didn't get the S24 or whatever," right? And you know how people are petty about that stuff. So
yeah,
I can see how there's a bit, that mid-range gap that we have in this country that, is why the 7A is such an outlier, why the 12R is such a hit,
yeah. Yep.
because we don't really have that. It's that mid-range segment in the US really only exists for the fans, in my opinion, which sucks
Yeah.
because everybody should be able to buy a good phone for $500 instead of $1,000.
Yeah. Even the base models like S24 and the iPhone 15, you're what? They're like 800 bucks, 700. So versus these mid range phones, that's still a
I mean,
big
you add
difference.
tax and maybe like
Yeah.
a case or something, and then you're at
hmm
like close to $1,000. You add a bit of storage too because you're not going to need it, right? So like, yeah, like I bought an iPhone 15 for my niece recently,
hmm
and I was for the holidays just before Christmas, and we got slightly better tier of storage. We got Apple Care, and like it was $1,000 for a freaking
Yeah, right.
iPhone
All said and
15.
done. Yeah.
And I'm totally happy because she had an old phone and she needed an upgrade. But I'm just like, it goes really fast. The same with iPads, right? Like I'll buy the base iPad, but then you buy the keyboard and the pencil and the blah blah
Pencil.
blah. And
Yeah.
next thing you know, like, oh, I'll get an Air instead because I might as well. I'm spending. Then you add all these things, and now it's the price of a Pro, and then you buy a Pro, and then you walk out of the Apple store and you spend 2.5 grand on an iPad.
Yeah.
Oops.
I often wonder, like, I haven't bought carrier phone in a long time, but would they lump that all into your monthly
Yeah.
costs, lease for the phone?
They
Which,
will. It's a separate thing. Like, so you pay a like say an amount every month, but it's a
yep,
separate plan. So you get your data plan, like your call plan,
yep,
a service plan if you want, and then you have like a $5, $6, $7 a month on top of that for your phone. That lasts for the duration, like 2 years, 3 years of
cheers,
your
yep,
phone subsidy. And then you get, of course, also whatever insurance you buy on top of that, like the third
yep,
party insurance they like to sell you. Like I only know this because again, I've bought phones for friends and family recently. Myself, as you know, well, we don't buy phones, first of all, because we get them for free. But if we were to buy, I bought an iPhone 15 Pro Max. So, I
hmm
know that I just paid full price for it. No Apple Care because I'm careful and I don't think I'm going to keep it that long and, all that. But it is still like you and I would always buy phones full price, right? Like we'd get
yeah,
a deal. But speaking of deals and speaking of Apple, I just, as an aside, this is so incredible, blew my mind so much. I'm almost like, I want to buy one right now because I don't need it, but it's nice to have a backup. The MacBook Air M1, the one that was just discontinued by Apple, the
hmm
base model, 999 was 999. That only has 8 gigs of RAM and 256 gigs of storage. Hold your pitchforks here. Just hear me
yep,
out. Is $699 on Walmart right now, new. in a choice of 3 colors. So look, if you've been jonesing for a new Apple Silicon Mac, this
Mhm.
is an unbeatable deal. I would highly recommend it, even with the lesser storage and RAM, because the reality is Apple will maintain and support this laptop for at least 2, 3 years more, probably
Mm.
4 years more. Um, and yes, if you buy an M3 right now, you're going to get 7, 8 years of support. But look, for that money, it's
Yeah,
almost
that's
good as a backup or as a, you keep it connected to a monitor all the time, like treat it like a Mac Mini, basically. Like, I don't know, I'm tempted to buy one because I still have an Intel based Mac.
oh, Mac. Wow,
I
that's a
still have an
while.
iMac 27. It's a good one, but it's
Mhm.
getting slow. Like everything about it is solid. Lots of RAM, lots of storage.
Mhm.
But I'm thinking to myself, like, if I made this thing the compute unit, right? I just plug in a bigger SSD into it, like Thunderbolt SSD, so it's going to be really fast. I don't need this. I put like 1 TB of storage external on it, and the RAM
Mhm.
I can live with. Apple Silicon Macs are pretty good with RAM. So, it'd be a great deal. Like I just plug that into a monitor and I basically have a good replacement for my iMac. So I don't know. I'm thinking about it. If you're shopping, $699. Can't believe it. Amazing.
That's yes, cheaper than an iPad Pro. So
I mean, the Mac
yeah.
Mini is like $499, but I think you don't get a keyboard and a
Nope.
display and a battery and
Extra.
all that stuff, right?
Yep.
Um. Anyway, another phone that was dropped on us this week was like kind of surprising, and it's kind of the end of an era. So I think we should talk about this because I just showed the Xiaomi 14 and how I like how small it is. The ASUS Zenfone 11 Ultra is out and about, and it replaces the Zenfone 10,
Yeah.
which was the last of a long lineup of really small, really
Tiny.
spec loaded
Yeah.
flagships, like headphone jacks, wireless charging, OIS, like the whole, like real proper flagships was 8 gen, whatever. And this is the end of an era. Sony for a while did these compact phones. ASUS kind of took that over with the Zenfone
Mhm.
series. And now by going
Yeah, really
full size
tiny.
with the Zenfone 11 Ultra, we're losing this. So if you're looking for a small Android phone right now, you want the best small Android phone, and you're waiting, right, for what's coming next. I say go buy yourself a Zenfone 10. Hopefully, you get a
Mhm.
deal because Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 is still really solid, and it's gonna last you a few years, and it's an incredibly great phone.
Yeah, for the size, like, you typically think, small phones get, inferior specs. They're worse at, the camera and it's slower. But yeah, the Zenfone 10 it's a super compact phone, and for the performance and the price, like it's gonna be missed.
Yeah, especially because they have the ROG phones at ASUS, right? So if you wanted a
Yeah.
big, heavy, like kind of fast and super crazy phone, you could go buy the ROG phone, right?
Hmm.
So now this 11 Ultra is a large phone. Now, sure, its specs are impressive. It's got the HN
It
3, it's
looks
got a big
nice.
battery, it looks nice, it's got nice camera system, but it doesn't really stand out in any way because the 10 stood out because it was small. I
It
mean,
was
you look
different.
at
Yeah,
it,
okay.
the cameras here are like 50 megapixel IMX 890. That's last year's sensor,
Yeah.
so it does have the gimbal stabilizer, which is
Yes, I was
unique.
gonna say that was the
Very,
one
very
thing that I
cool.
remember.
Yeah.
Yep.
But it
Yep.
does have only a 13 megapixel ultra. It only has a 32 megapixel telephoto 3x. There's no details on whether that's like OIS or not on this one,
Hmm.
which I think is a little weird, frankly, to put a telephoto. I'm looking at the specs here on the website. Yeah, it does have. Thank God the telephoto has OIS, so we're not completely SOL here. Um, and the rest of it is it's my point is it's kind of very boring. Like it's kind of very much what everybody else is doing. Big battery, fast
Hmm.
charging and wireless charging, but I don't know. I was hoping they would continue on their path. What
Small
about
size.
you,
Yeah.
John? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's a big departure, I guess, from what they put out last time. But for me, I feel like with that Snapdragon 8 Gen 3, because we tested out the last Asus ROG phone, and that one is our top leader as far as longest battery life that we've tested. And, that's obviously attributed to the Snapdragon 8 Gen 3, which, the OnePlus 12 and the Galaxy S24 Ultra did tremendous job. Like, it wasn't a small step forward for battery life improvement. It was like a giant leap. We're talking about like usually year over year we see an hour increase at the bare most for most of these phones. But this time around with the Snapdragon 8 Gen 3, we just saw like 3+ hours of improvement on those other phones. So maybe this phone's also going to target that area around battery life. But that's I think the only big thing that stands out for me. That 65-watt wire charging, which is okay, not bad, not bad. The OnePlus 12 is faster.
Yeah,
If you get the
yeah.
international one. Um, but yeah, it's to me it feels like another big phone that you see pretty much elsewhere.
I agree with you 100%. That's kind of how I feel. I'm like, okay, look, this phone looks great. Like, there's nothing to complain about here. There's some unique little features. But overall, it's kind of very boring. It's like very much what everybody else is doing.
Else is
And I'm
doing.
just like,
Yep.
yeah. So it's kind of the end of an era in many ways. And that's a bit of a bummer, to be honest with you, right?
Yeah.
So
It is.
it is. So, the other thing that happened is a bunch of leaks happened this week, which is interesting. Um, the Honor Magic 6 Ultimate, well, it's not fully leaked in the sense that the design for it was officially kind of teased.
Hmm.
The Ultimate and the RSR, the Porsche Design Edition, is basically the kind of top version of that, Magic 6 series. We got the Pro at MWC, and that's pretty solid. But the
Hmm.
Ultimate, kind of cranks things up a notch with a 1-inch sensor from OmniVision,
Yes.
which
Yeah.
which I mean, so this is the leaked part. This is the rumored part that it's a 1-inch OmniVision. I didn't even know OmniVision made 1-inch sensors. What the hell? Like, what's your take on that?
That's a big sensor. Very few camera phones still have a full 1-inch sensor. They're almost to that. But this is gonna definitely help it out, especially for low light. I feel like 1-inch sensor. Yeah, if you look at some pocket cameras that have 1-inch sensors, I used to have like this old Sony one, and for low light, it just killed it
Yeah.
for photos. So
Yeah.
the other thing is, I think this one has what, the variable aperture.
Yeah, so that's the other thing I was going to bring up. Thanks for doing though. Like the Xiaomi 14 Ultra has variable aperture. Now, 1-inch sensors have been around for a while. The Oppo Find
Nokia.
X7 Ultra that I took to Antarctica and took all my photos with has a 1-inch sensor, but no variable aperture. Now,
Hmm.
Xiaomi has done variable aperture on the 13 Ultra before and the 14 Ultra now, and Huawei has definitely done variable aperture. They were like kind of the first to do it. I think it was, I want to say the Mate
Yeah.
50 series, and then the Mate 60
Hmm.
has it as well, and the P60 series as well. And we all know that Honor came out of Huawei. They still have a lot of engineers that kind of like worked on some Huawei projects. I'm sure that it's not very surprising to anybody that they would be one of the first after Xiaomi to bring the variable aperture to a phone. So the question is it completely variable or is it just two steps? Because the
Yeah.
Xiaomi
Yep.
ones are just two steps.
Hmm.
But Huawei at first did two steps, kind of like Samsung did with the was it the S10 back in the day?
That's 9.
S9, thank you. But variable, like Huawei's done actual completely variable, which is like, whoa. So I don't know what this is, but I'm intrigued. Like, as soon as I see 1-inch sensor and variable aperture, I'm sure you feel the same. You're like, oh, give it to me. Want to try it?
Yeah, to be frank, I have not tried out the other phones with variable aperture, but as someone who does a lot of video, for photos, it's great, but it's really different with video because when you have a variable aperture, the you could kind of see it when you step down in exposure when it like goes from light to dark. It's usually abrupt if it's not a true, variable aperture. So with video, you see a slow, gradual change in the exposure as the aperture is increasing or decreasing, versus the ones that the S9 had, where it was either one or this. And when you do that, you're going to see a big difference, especially in video as you're actively recording.
Yeah. For sure. Yeah, I'm gonna try the 14 Ultra as my first phone with variable aperture, so I'm not sure how that's gonna pan out. But I'll let you all know, of course. The thing for me is that, I'm more into the photography aspect. So I'm gonna actually test this, but I figure that when you do video, it locks the aperture to whatever you selected first. Because otherwise, you're right, it would be really horrible. Like it would
Yeah.
just pop in a weird way. So so I think we'll see how it goes. But I'm excited about, they basically took the Magic 6 Pro and just changed the main sensor with this 1-inch variable aperture sensor. And of course, it's prettier looking. And the Porsche design will probably be like two and a
Yeah.
half, €1,000 or something crazy like that. But this is China only anyway.
Hmm.
So, don't get too excited, but it's our job to like keep track of what technology is being announced, and because eventually we get it somewhere else than China. So there you go. Basically. And the other leak is a Pixel leak. And before we talk about the Pixel leak, I just want to chat with you about Google I/O because it's coming up on May 14th and 15th,
It's official.
2024. They made the big announcement yesterday. I got my invite. I'm going to be attending. I got to find my way down to San Francisco, which isn't very hard since I have a place down there. So I'm just going to fly down for a few days, hang out, and go to I/O. Are you coming along?
Might be. We'll
All
find
right.
out.
I'd be nice to see you in person. And I think the last time I saw you, did I see you at CS? Or I didn't see you
No,
at
I did
CS
not
or
go to CS.
MWC.
It's the first time.
But did you go to MWC and did I miss you there?
Nope. You
Okay.
missed me. I rarely attend trade shows
Somehow
nowadays.
the last memory in my brain of seeing you in person was on your scooter in the lobby of that Edge building in New York City when we were doing the OnePlus Open
Yes.
briefing. Am
Yeah,
I
they didn't
right?
let me in. They didn't let me in. They're
Because
telling
of the
me
scooter.
yes, yes, which is very annoying now.
So you
I
couldn't
can't.
you couldn't tie it up anywhere or anything, right?
Well, I've tried that before and it got stolen. So that's the reason why I
Oh,
always bring it in with me everywhere.
and they wouldn't. Oh
Yeah,
man,
but
I'm
what are you
sorry.
gonna do?
That sucks. Because it's such a great way to get around. Jeez.
Yeah, for city, yeah, absolutely.
Well, I hope to see you at I/O because I/O is always a bit special. I mean, the keynote, it's fun to document with some tweets. But
Hmm.
then, like last year, I got tons of hands-on time with the 7A and the Pixel Fold.
Well, yeah,
And that, just to have like a buffer of like audio and video content, that you can use later on, it was really, really helpful. So I'm hoping that something like that comes about, at this I/O. And speaking of which, we have this Pixel Fold 2 leak. And,
hmm,
we've seen before that, the camera pod in the back was going to look different and stuff. I didn't really go into that in the show too much because I'm like, it looks like a render. Who knows what it's, anybody can make
hmm.
something up. But here we have some more solid thoughts and dimensions on
Yep,
what the screen sizes are going to be.
bigger. Yeah,
Bigger, but more importantly, the form factor, the aspect
yeah.
ratio looks
The
like it's
aspect
going to
ratio. Yeah,
be more like a OnePlus Open and less like the
square.
Passport, you know?
Yeah. Yep.
How do
Yep.
you
Yep.
feel about that?
Um, you know, when the Pixel Fold launched last year, it was very different from the Z Fold. I mean, Z Fold 5. It
Yeah.
had that really long aspect ratio at the front. For some people, just holding it one handed when it's closed, it felt more natural.
Yeah.
So now we're going to go for a slightly wider look. It's I like the OnePlus Open. I think it's what it does is it makes it really thin. It's deceiving because it's really thin, but yet at the same time with that camera hump, it's like kind of thick. But as far as just the aesthetics, it makes it look better. Might make it look prettier functionally. I'd be curious to see how they tackle the multitasking aspect. They do have that two side by side thing going on, but nowhere near as good as the OnePlus Open.
Yeah, the OnePlus Open really nailed it, both in terms of form factor hardware and then the actual user experience of like taking advantage of this screen real estate and making it sing as far as multitasking goes. And I think it's they set the standard. Like I think
Yeah.
Samsung's going to have to go there with the next generation, and I
Hmm.
think that it does make sense that Google would adopt the same form factor, even though to be frank, there's two things that I really loved about the original Pixel Fold. And I would have made it my main phone because, I'm a Pixel user, right?
Mhm.
But it was the camera that I loved and the form factor. But I didn't like, of course, tensor, bah, and the
Oh, yeah, it's such a
bezels and the general
oh gosh, it
build
was ugly.
quality and the way the whole thing, it felt fragile to me. Whereas the open feels like I could throw it under a bus and nothing bad would happen. Same with the Galaxy, right? Like I think of all
It's
of them,
old
the
now.
the, the Z Fold is like the tank. Like I feel like you could literally like just like use it as a hammer and nothing bad would happen. Um, so yeah, like that's the thing. And if this phone has slightly better software and feels a little more rugged in hand and has the
Mhm.
same form factor as the Open, I might switch to it for my main phone. Because right now, here's the problem, John. I don't know if you're in the same boat, but I'm a Pixel girl. I got my Pixel 8 Pro, it's all the
Yes.
call features, all the,
Call
I just
screen.
can't. I just can't. Yeah, I've got you've got the blue one. I've got this purple case on the white one.
Yeah.
I love my Pixel, not because
Mhm.
Tensor is the part I hate, but everything else about it. And I have a OnePlus Open in my other pocket because, well, I love the real estate and I love working on it and I love getting
Yeah.
productive on it. This isn't the
Yeah.
case, but that phone is one of the few review phones that hasn't left my pocket since I reviewed it. It's like, wow, like usually I have an
They
iPhone in my
said
second pocket. So the
yeah.
bottom line is if they can deliver something that's close to as good as the Open with all the Pixel features, there's no brainer. I'm going to be a folding phone as a main phone person for the first time. So I'm excited
Yeah,
about that.
the software too. I'm kind of curious about what they do with Android 15. But for the Pixel Fold 2, what other tricks up the sleeve they'll have. The reason why I stuck with the Pixel 8 Pro like you is because of all those Google AI assistant features. The call screen where Google Assistant is picking up the
I
phone call for you.
know.
You don't have to work. If you're stuck in a meeting, like right, someone calls me, I could just make those selections, and there you go.
Yeah. I love it. I mean, I screen almost every call that comes in that I don't recognize, unless it sells spam and then, of course I ignore it. But like if I see a call, a phone number, and even a name I don't recognize, I call
Hmm.
screen it. And, generally it totally kind of like eliminates the people that are spammers because they hang up.
Hmm.
And then if it's like somebody that really is important, like say it's my insurance agent but I don't recognize the number or something, like they'll say, hi, I'm trying to reach Miriam, and it transcribes it. I'm like, oh, I gotta
Yep.
pick that up, this is important. It's so like, to me it's become so critical that I don't think I could like move to even my Open as my
Going
main
back.
phone like right
Yeah.
now. So yeah, it's hard. Like I think once you experience, it's kind of like some people feel the same way about the Apple ecosystem or the Tesla ecosystem. It's like once you're in, you're just you're not going to leave, right?
Makes
Like
it tough.
basic tough, yeah. So I'm really excited about the Fold 2 because I kind of hope it becomes my main phone. Um, so having more info, we still don't know for sure if that camera pod that we saw a few weeks back is real. We don't still know exactly, but we know it's also probably going to have the next generation of Tensor. At least I hope so. I hope they don't do what they did last year, which they put the Tensor 3 and the 8 and the Tensor 2 in the Fold that
The
came out like
fold,
3
yeah.
months before.
Yeah. It has to be the four.
Uh, yeah, it's a rough one. We'll see how it goes though. So Google I/O folks, stay tuned. I'll be covering it. Hopefully I'll do a podcast that week with some of the people attending like I tried to do in the past, and hopefully we get some more visibility. Maybe they'll surprise us with a Pixel 8a. It's been leaking, so
Hmm.
you never know.
The next budget.
Yeah, the rumors it's going to be a little more pricey, which is
Yeah.
kind of a bummer, honestly, wouldn't you say?
I I guess I understand why, but yeah, it's already what, 499. And then maybe you might find yourself $50 off, but it's steering away from the price that I was comfortable, for getting the phone. But yeah, it's a bummer that even budget phones are prone to price increases.
Yeah, I think they're trying to kind of like they brought the 8 up market a bit, and I think they're trying to like also, inflation, supply
Well,
chain,
yeah,
it's getting
yeah.
expensive. And the reality is like, remember, we did get a Pixel 4a, 4G, not 5G. Remember that one? The tiny one? That was what, 349, 3 it was cheap, right? But they've
But
been
yeah,
slowly going up in price
up.
since then, right? So
Hmm.
even the 3A, remember 3A?
It's been a while. I remember it kind of, but yeah, it's been a while.
The 3A was like the last of it was 3 something, and it was like there was a 3 and a 3A XL, remember? And then they still had the bezels,
The
remember? There
Excel,
was
yeah,
like,
yeah.
yeah, that
Mm.
was the first wave of affordable Pixels. Look,
I still remember
I,
the Nexus.
I, me too. I use them all. But my point is like I cannot overemphasize how every single Pixel A series we've had in our
Hmm.
lives, we've reviewed, we've played with, has been absolute winners. Every
Yeah.
single one of them.
Hmm.
So I'm willing to see some price hikes because you know what? I get it. I just hope that it doesn't get to the point where if the A series costs the same as a Pixel 8 or 9 or whatever, it's like no
Yeah.
point anymore. So see how it goes. Another phone that I didn't mention in my list on the show notes that I sent you, John, is the Realme 12 Plus. So I hope this thing is actually out because I have no embargo and it just arrived today. And it's not the 12 Pro Plus. I have the 12 Pro Plus.
Hmm.
This is the Realme 12 Plus. And I think it's
Well,
India
plus.
only. And I see a lot of videos out there about it. And so I think it exists. Yes, it looks like on the global website it's been announced. Um, so it's got a Dimensity 7050 and
Okay.
120 hertz AMOLED, but flat. Doesn't have the curved edges like the 12 Pro Plus. And yeah, it's basically a scaled down version of the 12 Pro Plus. It doesn't have the crazy telephoto. It has a Sony Lydia 600 sensor, which is kind of exciting.
Hmm.
And then what else is there to be said about it?
120 hertz
Yeah,
refresh rate.
it's a
Yeah.
flat screen, which is unusual for BBK Group. I mean, it's getting more common on their mid rangers, but
Hmm.
yeah, it's got a nice, and the chipset is a pretty solid chipset too. So yeah, I've got one here. I'll let you folks know what I think about it after playing with it for a little bit. And the rest of it, it does have OIS, which is great. The rest of it is a little bit more lower rent, as it were. But at
Hmm.
the same time, I can't complain too much. I love it. I receive a phone I haven't known anything about, and out of nowhere like that, it's like, oh, great, thanks.
It's
That's
giving
the
me
story of
OnePlus
my
Open
life.
vibes.
Yeah, I don't know what it is for you, but on average, I get a phone a week. And some of them I'm like, yeah, I knew that was coming, like the Ultra, 14 Ultra. But like some of them, like, wait, what? Does it exist? Is that a thing? And then I have to like look it up. And
Yeah.
I'm just lost. Battery on this is 5,000 milliamp hour, 67-watt charging, in display fingerprint, stereo
Not
speakers.
bad.
So that main camera is the big story here because it's got OIS 8 megapixel ultra wide and 2 megapixel macro. So,
Oh, well, no surprise there.
nothing too crazy here, but the pricing 347 euros roughly.
Okay.
So,
Okay. So, yeah.
not too bad, not too shabby, right? Cool. Well, listen, let me talk a little bit briefly about this eBay Motors thing that I did not too long ago. So, like back in late January, before I went on my big Antarctica trip, which took up most of February, before I went to Barcelona, basically, I just got invited to try out some cars with and without snow tires. So the same cars, one without, one with. And,
Hmm.
like a lot of you who live in cold climates already know this. I don't have to explain this to you. Get snow tires. It will save your life and it makes a huge
Hmm.
difference. That didn't surprise me. What surprised me the most is that it'd been a really long time since I personally had driven a car in snow with snow tires because, we do get snow on the West Coast and the Pacific Northwest sometimes. I used to live in Portland. Now I spend half my time in Vancouver, and every now and then we get some snow. Of course, my cars always have all season tires because there's really no point in having snow tires for the 2 days a year where I can just leave the car in the garage kind of thing, you know. But if you live in, the East Coast anywhere, the snow belt, having snow tires is a big deal. So it was really great for eBay Motors to fly me all the way out to Yellowstone. The airport in the park of Yellowstone is closed in the winter, not the big airport. That one's always open. The Bozeman Yellowstone one is always open, but the other small one. So they turn it into a test track for a lot of car manufacturers, which is a great way to make money, right? You rent out your very
National
snowed
park,
up
yeah.
runways and so we got to play, like I got to drive a Porsche 911 with and without snow tires. So because the default tire for the 911 is a summer tire, it was impossible to even move the car on the snow with the summer tire. I did manage to do a tiny little loop, but by being very gentle. But with the snow tires, that thing was a blast. I mean, I used to own a Porsche. I know I love them. I know how they drive. But this one, I was amazed at what a snow tire could do for that car. And we drove everything from like a Toyota Camry to like a GMC, what is Chevy Equinox, to like a Ford F-150. The only thing that was missing, and that's kind of why I kind of thought they invited me for, was EV, right? So I was hoping they'd have like a Tesla Model 3 or something with snow tires without, and they didn't. And that was why I haven't really written on Tech Radar about this visit to Yellowstone and to Big Sky, was where the resort that they put us up. But I want to thank them for trying. And I did get a chance to talk to some of the engineers about how the tires are designed for snow. And it's kind of, as a nerd, I was like, and a car nerd, I was like, this is really interesting. But what I'd love to them to do, and I've pointed that out to them, and I'll keep you guys posted, is to give us an experience with EVs. And more importantly, to have some people on hand to talk about how different it is to create a snow tire for EVs. We already know it's different to create a normal tire for EVs because the cars are heavier. They tend to wear out tires more because of the torque. And so, they have to formulate the tire differently. Also, tire noise is much more obvious in an electric car. So the base tires have to be different. So I'm wondering how the EV tires make a difference. And the other thing, from a nerd perspective is like, how do you program regen braking, traction control, all that to work well with a snow tire? Because as we know, regen braking in the snow can be a bit of a crazy thing. Like your car starts braking, but it's kind of having no traction. So thankfully, you can turn that off. There's always a snow mode on most EVs, or a way to kind of temporarily say, hey, don't use regen or lower the regen. But those are things that I want to talk to engineers and people about. So if you're listening out there, not just eBay Motors, who was kind enough to take me out, but anyone out there who has potentially the ability to tell us about snow tires for EVs and how EVs, how the managing of the powertrain works in the snow for an EV, I'd love to hear about it. So yeah. What's your take on all this? You exploring EVs right now, right?
Slowly. I'm going to be covering the New York Auto Show in a couple of weeks, so I'm kind of excited about that. So, the whole EV, I should ask you because you know everything about EVs. It's just I'm coming from a 15-plus-year-old car that I've had for a long time. So, for a first time buyer, someone who's going to think about buying, an EV or a hybrid or one of those hybrid EVs, what's going to give me the best value long term. And that's the thing I want to explore when I check out, all the stuff at the New York Auto Show.
Yeah, it's a tough proposition, right? Because I think that as, EVs particularly, but all cars are turning into more like smartphone on wheels, my recommendation in this transitional time is lease. You don't want to own these cars because, we don't know what the update situation is going to be like, what the reliability is going to be like. Don't get me wrong. I've had 2 Model 3s in a row. They were leases. So, 3 years each. I'm on the end of my second lease and I've only had good experiences but I would never buy them. Like, they're no problems with reliability, no problems with anything. It's just, I'm just like, even my first one, when I traded it in, was starting to get less updates with new features because the computers were old and they couldn't keep the updates
Mhm.
going. So I think that tells you a lot. Like, and you look at your phone after 3 or 4 years, right? It's not realistic. So that's a bad thing, but at the same time, I think eventually the industry will figure out how to make this all work, and maybe then we can own cars again. But I think right now, at least when you're going pure EV, lease and buy something you're excited about, I think we're in a very good place right now because all the makers are adopting supercharging in the US, which is critical. Like I don't charge
Mhm.
at home. I live in apartments both in San Francisco and in Vancouver, so I can't plug in. And I use the supercharger network, and it's great. I have no issues. I don't commute to work anyway, so it's like my charges last me like 3 weeks, driving around town and doing stuff. And then one night I'm going, oh, it's low. I'm just going to go to the supercharger when the prices are low, and I plug in and
Hopefully,
I watch
yeah,
Netflix for 20, 30 minutes and I'm done, or I go shopping at the
yeah,
mall or
supercharged.
something. So it's not a big deal. But the point I'm making is we're in a time of change, and I think committing right now to buying a car is very hard. So consider leasing. And then the other thing is if you feel like this range stuff still worrying you, or the supercharger network, or maybe the company that
Mhm.
you're interested in buying a car from is not yet partnered with Tesla or whatever for the supercharging access, then maybe look at a hybrid. If you can plug in at home, though, a plug-in hybrid makes a lot of sense. If you can't plug in at home, I say just buy a regular hybrid. And then you don't have to worry too much about obsolescence and
Mhm.
but then you have more maintenance, right? As soon as you have a gas engine in there, even if it's a gas engine that gets used from time to time, you got oil changes and you get to maintain and you get
Yeah.
things that can break. The nice thing about pure EVs is nothing ever breaks. Like the battery packs last hundreds of thousands of miles. It's just a really, really nice experience. So yeah, it's a difficult time right now to recommend cars to people. It's basically all. Yeah.
I don't disagree. It is.
I'll be really excited to find out what your take is after seeing the cars at the auto show. So let's talk about that at some point. We should wrap up, John. Do you want to tell folks where they can find you on the internet, where you write, all your social media handles, and all that good stuff?
Yeah, you can find a lot of my stuff at Tom's Guide. I'm a senior editor mobile there. But besides that, you can find me at pretty much every platform, social media, even TikTok, surprisingly. At John C. Velasco, or just type in my name. I'm pretty sure you'll find me. Yeah, and YouTube every now and then. I'll be on. I'll
Still
shoot a
do
video or
videos, huh?
something.
Right on.
Yeah. But yeah, that's where you can find me.
Sounds great. So, folks, read up on all of John's great work at Tom's Guide and check out his YouTube channel and his social. You know where to find me on the internet. I'm at TankerL, on all the social. You'll find me on Insta, on Twitter, on Threads, on Facebook, everywhere, Blue Sky even. So follow me there. If you want to subscribe to the podcast, you want to recommend the podcast to people, mobiletechpodcast.com is the URL. You can click there and they'll like way to subscribe to all the platforms, so like Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Pocket Casts, Spotify, whatever your favorite thing is. Or you can search for Mobile Tech Podcast with Tanker or TNKGRL on your favorite app. If your app lets you rate or review the show, by the way, please do that. It would really help. So, that's the podcast. And there's a YouTube channel, youtube.com/Mobile Tech Podcast, some occasional unboxing videos there. You know how YouTube works. So like, subscribe, tell your friends, click the bell, comment about the podcast, give me your thoughts, have a conversation with me that's not lost in the threads and Twitter universe, because that's hard to follow. And then if you want to help me out, patreon.com/Tankerl. That's patreon.com/TNKGRL. This podcast exists as an audio version that's free and a video version. And the video version is something you get if you sign up for Patreon, if you sign up for the right tier. There's a bunch of tiers there. One gives you the video and the Discord and stuff. So consider helping me out by supporting me if you can. You get the video version a bit in advance, like a day or two. So you get to see the podcast and see us with the phones and stuff. Sometimes there's fun bloopers in there too, like when FedEx shows up in the middle of a recording or something. And yeah, it's a little more personal. So consider helping me out if you can. Patreon.com/TNKGRL. And I also want to thank our sponsor, Mint Mobile. So, as you know, I'm constantly reviewing multiple phones, and while that's fun, it also means I'm constantly spending a lot of money for wireless service on multiple SIMs. That's where Mint Mobile comes in, and that's who I'm partnering with for today's podcast. If you also want to save money on your wireless service, switch to Mint Mobile. As tech savvy early adopters, you've probably heard of Mint Mobile before, but let me quickly tell you how awesome their service is. Mint Mobile offers premium wireless for as low as $15 a month, and you don't have to sacrifice any coverage, speed, or data. They're built on the nation's largest 5G network. They keep costs low because they sell direct to you online. They cut out the retail stores and salespeople. Why should you pay more than you have to for access to the same network? In my experience testing phones, Mint Mobile delivers the same data speeds and call quality as the big three for a fraction of the cost. Switching to Mint is super easy. Thanks to their eSIMs, you can sign up and activate immediately right on your phone from the comfort of your home. No more standing around and waiting in line at a big wireless store. You can keep your current device and phone number and easily switch services. And if your phone isn't eSIM compatible, Mint will ship you a new SIM free of charge. All Mint Mobile plans include unlimited nationwide talk and text, lightning fast 5G, and free mobile hotspot. Mint will show you how much data you use each month and recommend plans that save you money. Mint also offers a modern family plan that lets you set up a super affordable family plan with as little as 2 lines. Use my link mintmobile.com/mobiletech to get premium wireless starting for $15 a month. That's mintmobile.com/mobiletech. Stop paying more than you need on your wireless bill and start saving big with Mint Mobile. And John, thanks so much for being my guest yet again. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Anytime. Thanks for having me.
Fantastic. We'll have you on the show again at some point soon. And folks, you know I'll have another show next week, so stay tuned for that. Until then, cheers, everybody.